Hi, welcome to another demonstration for the Unitrends Certified System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to talk about asset management. Starting here in our lab, just as a reminder, I've deployed a local source Unitrends backup appliance here. It's running on 192.168.100.99. You can see that address here. I assigned that address through the installer. Remember, I showed you that in a previous module 1.2 on configuring the systems. So through that installer, I assigned it to 100.99. You can also go through the console here on the back end I showed you in that lab, and you can modify the address. You can also modify it inside of the user interface once you're logged in as well too. So just as a reminder, that appliance is deployed. I'm going to use the Chrome browser anytime I want to modify or do anything with my protected assets. I'm going to go to my local source UEB, and I'm going to log in as myself so I can audit anything that I do on these assets. First thing I want to do when I really log in, just kind of as a quick review, is check your alerts. Make sure you don't have anything outstanding. Do you have any updates that need to be applied? Are you meeting your retention goals? Any of those kind of alerts. Are there clients that are no longer listening? Another common alert up there as well too. We're going to show you today, right now in my backup summary, there's nothing in here listed as not protected and nothing as protected. As we start to register assets, our not protected number is going to go up. That number is going to go up as we start to register assets, and once we start to run backups on them, these two numbers will shift. We're going to show you that as we start to register some of these assets. Anytime we deal with our assets, we're going to go under the configuration or the configure tab down here, and there's the appliance area in the top menu here, and that's our local source that we're on. We're going to make sure we're on the protected assets tab on our local source appliance by address up here. Now, you'll notice this banner at the top here under Protected Assets here. You know, we could go right to Add an Asset. I'll show you that in just a second. But you may want to think about coming in here and managing your credentials before you start to register even your first asset. What credentials are you going to use to push out these agents to your Windows machines? What asset might be common in a group that you can use the same credential across that group of assets? So we're going to come in to manage the credentials area, and we're going to create a couple new credentials. All right, our first credential we're going to call is our local administrator account. We're going to use that same administrator username. We're going to type the password that's associated with this username. You know, whatever account you're going to use on these machines that has a local administrator, it might be the same account. The difference here for our local administrator account is we're going to leave the domain blank. That's going to allow it to use whatever the qualified name is of the machine and the administrator account for that qualified name because this is blank. We're going to create that account first. Then we're also going to create another credential that's going to be our domain admin, and we're also going to use that administrator account. But for this one, we are going to populate the domain with whatever your domain is. That way it's going to use the domain administrator account, and that domain administrator account, that needs to have local administrator accounts to install software. But let's go ahead and associate this credential with a password, and let's make this one our default here as well too. So now we've got two credentials in there, one for our local administrator. There is no domain associated, and then I've also got an account inside of my credentials for a domain administrator to be used as well too. Now there's no close up here. You can just cancel out of this screen, and now you're really ready to start registering all of your assets, whether they're physical servers or you're going to register to VMware as well too, or use those credentials inside of VMware for VMware Application Aware later on. Start to look at our assets and break them down. You may want to tie to VMware first. You know, most people want to tie to their virtual asset and their virtual host first, so that way they can see all the guests and they can start snapshotting at the guest and the OS level right away. So you may want to come in here and assign all of your credentials right for VMware right away. How do you tie to vCenter, or how do you tie to a host directly? That's the credential that you want to use in here. However you log into vCenter at the root super user level, right? What account do you want to associate and use in here? All right, now I only have one host in here. I'm tying to a host directly. Most of the time you'll tie to vCenter, and you might see multiple hosts with lists of all of your guests off of each of those hosts. By tying to vCenter, once again, it is preferred. Check the individual modules for all these virtual platforms, for VMware backups, for Hyper-V backups. Check those individual modules on how to tie to the hosts and how they're recommended. Check the administrator guide and deployment guides for best practices on VMware and tying to vCenter in each host. Very easy to tie to VMware. Hyper-V is the same way. Remember, I warned you about if you go to virtual host and you try to roll out Hyper-V from here, this process is going to fail on me. All right, this is actually 100.11. And even if I use the appropriate credentials down here and I try to run this, this process is going to fail on me because this process does not use the agent push. All right, I talked about that in the slideshow, the presentation in this module earlier. If you want to push the agent out to a Hyper-V host, just register it as a normal asset. And we're going to show you those next, like you would any other physical machine or any other Windows machine you want to push the agent to. We're going to register it under normal asset. That allows for the agent push, and we're going to use the credentials we created to push that and manage that to the Hyper-V servers. Now, if you want to go around and install your Hyper-V agents manually and use some third-party agent installer to push those out on your own and then come in here and register them with this method, as long as the agent was running on this machine, then you can register it using this interface here. All right, so there's the error message. And you'll notice once again, the agent is not pushed through this method. So I would just normally hit OK here, cancel out of here again, unless I want to register another VMware host, because that is, once again, agentless. It connects directly to the APIs within VMware. It doesn't require an agent to be installed. So if I want to tie to that same Hyper-V host, I would register it as a normal asset, and that way I can go ahead and push out the agent to this host. We're going to go ahead and use the domain account because this machine is on the domain, and we'll go ahead and register this account with the domain. Now, if I can, at the same time, just to show you how this works, if I can go over to the RDP session for my Hyper-V, and I want to use another account, and I want to log in as the domain account, when I log in as this domain administrator, if I can go to the desktop, and I can open up a share off the Unitrends appliance logged in as this user, whatever user I'm going to use as the credentials. If I can go to the desktop down here and I can open up a share off the Unitrends appliance to the Windows Agents folder, then I should be able to do an agent push. So let's go to my desktop. We're going to go to the File Explorer, and you just go in the address bar up here and type in the address to your appliance. And there's a Windows Agents folder. Here's my installers right there. That's the installer that Unitrends is using on the back side now to install the Unitrends program group out here. Here it is right here now. Right? It did the agent push out here to this machine. And under services for this machine now, I will see a BP agent automatically set as a startup type and running. That's our Unitrends agent running on port 1743. Now, it went through and it did this registration to my Hyper-V server. And in the background, it's doing an inventory check right now. And within a few minutes, it'll refresh my protected screen here. And also, under this inventory, it looks like it might already be done. Now I can see a list of my guests underneath Hyper-V the same way I can as VMware. Check the administrator guide and deployment guides for best practices on tying to Hyper-V hosts. And in the case of Hyper-V, every host in your Hyper-V cluster has to have a Unitrends agent. Just to get a little bit more detailed on you. You have to install the Unitrends agent on each one of your Hyper-V hosts, just to let you know, a little bit ahead of time. It's not like VMware where you can tie to vCenter and see all your hosts and all your guests. And even with VMware, it's recommended to tie Unitrends to each one of your hosts independently if you really read the administrator guide and the best practices. But in smaller environments, you can tie directly to vCenter and just see your 2 or 3 hosts and your less than 50 guests or so and probably not have any real issues. Unless you got some really big virtual machines. But very easy to tie to virtual hosts. So next come your physical assets. We're running our Windows 7 desktop here, our machine back here in the background, and you can see right now, Unitrends is not deployed. Just like we installed to our Windows hypervisor, our Hyper-V server, I can go ahead and deploy here to another asset for my Win 7 desktop. It's on IP address 100.100, and in this case, maybe I want to use the local administrator account. So it's going to use my local administrator. It's the account I'm logged into right now. It's the landing desktop/administrator. And when I roll out to this machine now, it is going to deploy in the program group a Unitrends agent menu program group. Same thing it did in Hyper-V. It's going to deploy that Unitrends agent. The bare metal media utility gets deployed in there too. There's 2 little programs that get installed on this machine. So if you go out here into your program group and you modify your programs and features, here you can see the Unitrends agent. But when this is all said and done and the registration is completed, if I refresh this again, you can actually see 2 software pieces that get installed. The Unitrends agent, that's the service that's running on port 1743, the BP agent service. But there's also the bare metal utility that gets deployed. We're going to talk about that in the bare metal recovery lab or the OS recovery lab as well. But that's that bare metal media utility you use to create an ISO image for 2003 servers, kind of becoming legacy today. So I'm not going to go into that right now, but it does get deployed, just so you know. It also has remote admin, which is real handy. It's the PuTTY session. We're going to show you how to use that in a little bit when we tie to our Linux servers. We go to do a manual install of the OS on our Linux servers. But as you can see, the Windows servers are really easy to deploy. I can keep going down through my list. Maybe I want to start doing my application servers. So maybe I want to do my SQL server next. It's on the domain, so maybe I want to use the domain account. If you have that Excel sheet and you've gone through and you've prioritized cattle, pets, and people, and you put maybe IP address column in that sheet, so you got a list of the IPs. You could even add, the credential name you want to use if you really want to get detailed. It's all in here in kind of the report screens, and you can export some of these screens and stuff to save this stuff once it's configured. But before you go through and install, having all this stuff organized is really cool to make sure that the installation process goes much smoother for you. All right, once again now, it's gone through and it can detect SQL and SharePoint, but it does take a few minutes for the inventory to go through and synchronize those applications so I can see the actual breakdown once again like we did for Hyper-V here, the actual application objects. In this case, it'll be SQL databases and the SharePoint farm. It's not a very big environment, so if I bounce around here for a few minutes and I go back, chances are these are already inventoried, and they are. So here you can see all of my SQL objects. I've got master model, MSDB. I've got customer main, sales main, accounts payable down here as well. These are all SharePoint databases that belong to my SharePoint farm. We're going to talk about those backups in more detail in each of those modules, but this is how you register the assets so you can see them. You're really ready once you create these registrations to go over to jobs and start to create your backup jobs based on these asset types that you have registered. If I want to see my VMware assets and start creating VMware asset jobs, there's my VMware assets. If I want to see the agents I have registered for file level recovery and integrated bare metal recovery, here's my SQL environment, all my SQL databases that I can protect and back up in a nice list. It's pretty easy, pretty cool to start creating those jobs once you start to add registrations once again or add in these assets into the user interface. If we keep going down that list, I've got the ability once again to contact or make a connection to my DC Exchange server. It's running on 100.12. It's the domain controller, so why not use the domain account? Once again, it's authenticating to this machine, installing and pushing the agent out, and then going to add this asset. It'll auto-detect any Microsoft-supported applications, in this case Exchange, and it's going to inventory my Exchange instances and pull a list of my mailbox groups, my mailbox data stores. Very easy to deploy into a Windows environment and detect these assets and the asset object types like applications, Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, Oracle, we're going to show you here next into Linux. So once again, the Exchange is done. You won't see it fully inventoried in here until you wait a few minutes or maybe bounce around in your interface. Then you'll go back and it's still not done yet. You can see now it says it's syncing the inventory. So we'll wait for that to finish, and then we'll refresh off and back on this screen. All right, there you can see the inventory sync is done. Once again, I I can't really see it here until I go off the screen anywhere else really and kind of go back. It is HTML5. Now it's inventoried. Now I can see my mailbox data stores here listed under the Exchange application node, under the agent node for my DC Exchange 2. Same basic thing you see for the SQL here. Once again, IP address is listed in here, the OS description, the credentials you're using to keep the agent up to date. For things like SharePoint, you may go in and associate a credential here. You can go in and edit the credential for this SharePoint farm. In some cases, you have to do that. Once again, check the SharePoint module for more detail on when to set those. You may have to go in and set VMware Application Aware across a certain server. You would edit that asset in the VMware area to set VMware Application Aware for this machine. That would allow Application Aware to be set for that machine. Right? Same concept across each of those assets. All right, now when we talk about adding Linux, totally different monster, because if I go once again and try to show a Linux server in here, and it's on 100.102, and once again there is no agent push for Linux, so I got to take that off. And if I try to register this, it's going to spin for a few minutes and try to check and see if there's an agent there, and it's going to fail. There is no agent installed on my Linux server right now. First thing I'll probably do is go out and check the administrator guide or the online help and see what it says about backing up Linux. So if I go out here to protected assets, and I go out to installing and updating the Linux agent, there is a preparing to install the Linux agent that kind of shows a breakdown of each of the operating systems and what their installers are like and some rights and things like that. What I want to do is I want to go right to installing the agent, and we're installing it on CentOS, so we're going to use the CentOS instructions, and I want to run the 64-bit installer right here. And I really just want this command all the way up to this dash right here. The release number is going to be different, but I'm going to copy that command right there. Get it ready. And in my PuTTY session, I can open up a command or a connection through the administrator account to this Linux Oracle server. In here, I've got my home directory. I've got a downloads folder right here. So if I go into that downloads folder and I do a directory listing, I've already installed the agents that are required for CentOS, and I've downloaded the agent Oracle dependency for CentOS as well too. So I've downloaded those from Unitrends.com website. From Unitrends.com, I went to support and downloads, and down here in the list, I went to CentOS, and I downloaded the CentOS 64-bit here and here for that machine. And really how I did it, just to be clear here, the easiest way to do it instead of typing wget commands is if you have a GUI interface like we do to my CentOS machine here, I could open up this, my VNC viewer, and I can log in as Unitrends1, my password to that machine, and you could go through the browser on your machine here, by the way. Could come into this machine. I'm logged in as my administrator account now, so I could come in here and type Unitrends.com. Could type Unitrends.com in my web browser here, and once again go to support and downloads, and I've got this complete list of all my Linux versions. Once again, I'm running CentOS and I'm running Oracle on 64-bit, so I downloaded both of these on my local administrator account on my Linux machine. That's what I'm logged into as here through my VNC viewer. So if I minimize that now, I'm logged into PuTTY as that same user. There's those two files I downloaded. Now if I've got that command that I looked up here once again, I can take this Linux agent command and I can run that inside of this PuTTY session once I've downloaded that 8.2 agent in this case. Sudo, and make sure I run that command as the sudo administrator. I'm going to say yes to run the installer. Might take a few minutes here when it's done. And once this is done, it may tell you, hey, check the Oracle dependency here. So we're going to go ahead and now run that same command from where the agent stops we're going to start typing Oracle and press Tab to finish out the Oracle Database 8.2. We're going to run that same installer from there. We're going to say yes to run this installer. All right, now once this is complete, that's all you really have to do on the agent side or the client side is just run those two installers. And now the registration on your local source, when you go to add that Linux client, that Linux guest, it's now going to see the existing agent that is there, and it's going to allow you to add that registration to that asset using that agent that we just installed. Once again, we did the Oracle dependency, so I'll see an inventory sync here, run again in a few minutes. Sometimes you don't see it, and if you just bounce around and you go back, you'll see when it's done. Okay, just give it a few minutes and it'll come out, and you'll be able to see your Oracle objects in there as well, your Oracle assets. So again, here at the top, I don't see anything refreshed as far as my assets that I've registered yet. Eventually, every so often, this will refresh up here. You'll see an updated number of not protected. This number is going to go up, and eventually, as we start to schedule backup jobs and we get completed fulls, they'll shift over here to being protected. If I go back here to configure now and I drop down my Linux, I can see my Oracle has now been inventoried, and now I can see a list of my databases in there as well too. And once again, for Oracle, you do have to set database permissions to be able to back up Oracle objects, so you may have to come in here and set credentials against these Oracle objects. You may have to go in and manage that credential and add a new Oracle credential to be able to protect that database. We're going to show you that once again in the Oracle module. But just so you know, that's how you manage your assets back here and setting those credentials. All right, last one we're going to do is our NAS. We've still got to do registration to our NAS. And actually, we've got one more Windows machine I'm going to show you. It's just a real simple RDR server. I haven't done that one yet. It's on 100.15 down here. It's on the domain as well, too. It is a Windows machine. So we're going to go ahead and register that asset as well, too. It is using the agent push through that credential. I should be able to log into the RDR server with that same account, that same credential, and browse to my appliance in a share, / the appliance address, and get to the Windows agents directory, as we showed you earlier. There's our RDR server is now in our inventory. And you can see it's just a straight agent, just like our Win 7 desktop. There is no application running on it, no SQL, no Exchange. It didn't detect anything like up here. Just a straight agent, file-level agent, protecting the operating system once we create backup jobs. Right now, nothing is protected. They're all just registered assets at this point. The last asset type I want to show you here is registering a NAS. Right, we're going to go in under adding the same protected assets. We're going to add a NAS. Right, we're going to type in our NAS name, which is going to be NAS apps vol1. We're going to put it on IP address 192.168.100.10, and it is a CIF share, so you got to make sure we get the protocol right. And the share name is apps vol1, and we're going to make sure we use our credential. Right? Whoops, we got to make sure we have the / in there too, and you can always see over here and click the help, the name of the share. It could be without the / I do believe as well too. We'll try it both ways. And what this really has to match is that you go over to your File Explorer, and if you type in the IP address, you should be able to get to that same share once again with that same name. And that's where we're at right here, is being able to see that IP address to that same share, and whatever credential you use to log in and see this account, that's administrator, and it's Unitrends 1, capital U. We're going to make that connection to that same share. That time it registered. So here's that NAS share. All right, now just like before, after you make that connection to any CIFS or NFS share, now if I go over to jobs and I go to create a job, in my what do you want to back up question, I've got a NAS in the list. I can go and see NAS. If I want to back up Exchange or just see my Exchange databases, I can drop it down to the Exchange type. Once you make all of these registrations, all of this stuff in here, all of these questions make sense. What do you want to create? What type of backup do you want to create for this group? You can only have one backup job in per group, right? You're going to learn all those kind of things in each one of these modules. But now, after you make asset registrations, you can now complete scheduling backups for any one of these asset types. When you look at editing the settings of some of these things, when you look back at your configure and your protected assets tab in here now, some of the cool things you can do is if you want to come in here and start to set retention policies or a single machine. Now, when you think about setting retention policy settings, once again, a lot of different options in here for you. You can create your manage policies here. What do you want to keep for backups? How many days do you want to keep them for? Warn me if it gets less than so many days. So if you want to keep 30 days at a minimum and 45 days, start purging after 45 days. Maximum retention down here, delete backups after so many days. I know I definitely don't want to keep any backups longer than XYZ, whatever that number happens to be. If you set this thing for up over 60 days, 80 days, 90 days, it can affect retention for all your other machines. So make sure, however you're using maximum retention, make sure those are the machines that you really need to keep out there at 60 to 80, 90 days. So your minimum goals they're not guarantees, once again. Just because you set a machine to keep 30 days doesn't mean you're going to keep 30 days. If you want to set some other machines down around, 20, 30 days so you have room for other machines to grow, this is the area you do that. Setting retention across each one of these assets individually allows you to do that. Encryption for each asset as well, too. When you go in and edit this as well, you can enable encryption right inside of here. Very easy to do that. You do have to enable encryption on your appliance first. Under Edit Settings, under Advanced, you can enable encryption, type your passphrase, write it down 3 times, 4 times, print it, triple, put it in sealed envelopes, whatever you're going to do with it. Make sure you don't lose it. Once you enable it here, then you can enable it inside of your protected assets here when you go and look even across any of these. If I want to enable encryption across my SQL SharePoint asset, I can do that at the VMware asset level here once I enable encryption. Here you can also see enable application-aware processing for those credentials too. We talked about that earlier. And once again, setting retention policies across each asset into VMware too. You can do that down into databases. Once again, if I want to look at my DC Exchange and I've got 4 different mailbox groups, but maybe for 2 of these groups, I want to manage different retention policy settings, I can set retention differently across those 2 database objects. It's pretty cool, pretty easy. So there's a nice little overview for you on managing protected assets.